Dejana.
Today, January 6, 2021. Today, we witnessed what I call a domestic attack on our democracy. Protesters turned somewhat rioters stormed the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. My Twitter feed is filled with images and videos capturing today's events. And now I find myself pondering, I'm going to have a conversation with my kids about what happened today. And tomorrow morning, as a teacher, I'm going to facilitate a conversation with my students. There's a lot to think and talk about as educators today. Wouldn't you say, Leah?
Oh, absolutely. And thank you, Dr. Dejana. There's none of us who will be doing business as usual this evening. We all started today expecting a very different reality. And we were not planning to talk about this on today's stream, but how can you go through a day like this and not make it part of the conversation? So some of what we will do today is to talk with our guests and our panel about how we approach this conversation with students. But let's first introduce our amazing educator guest today, Bethany, who is the National Recruitment and Communications Director for EnCorps. And we had the opportunity to chat with both Bob and Wilson in our last two shows. And now we're happy to be able to have this conversation with Bethany. Dejana, do you want to introduce Bethany and give us a little bit about her background?
Absolutely. What an honor. Bethany joined EnCorps to find the best and brightest talent to help transition into career educators. Bethany earned her bachelor's degree in mathematics from the University of Minnesota and secondary math teaching credential from Loyola Marymount University. Hey, that's here in Los Angeles. 6 years into working with EnCorps, Bethany continues to be energized by the mission because she believes opportunity begins with education. Bethany has also worked for Teach for America and taught high school math and science at a high school in Hawthorne, California. We're so happy to have Bethany here.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes. And joining the conversation, we have our regular panelists. I want to introduce Tim Griffin. Go ahead and say hello, Tim.
Hello, everybody. And I'm just so relieved we all made it through 2020, and now things are just getting back to normal.
All right. Yes, absolutely. Tim brings a lot to our conversation. He's a regular with us, and he's a retired STEM teacher, an award-winning singer, songwriter, and storyteller, and the founding director of this amazing nonprofit, Griffin Ed. You got to check it out if you haven't. We should get that website up somewhere. We're really, really excited to have Tim join our conversations. Also, welcoming to the crew here, Dr. Marcela Klein Williams. Say hello.
Hey, how are you doing? And it's pretty remarkable is that we're walking through history from 2020 and today in 2021. I think all of us will remember where we were, who we were with, and what was happening at that time. And it's exciting that what we get to do is to talk about future and promise and possibilities, and especially those folks who have an encore, the second part of their life, of what they're striving to do and to be of such a positive impact as well. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Dr. Marcela Klein Williams is an accomplished leader in education and well-known in both formal and informal learning environments. She's a frequent speaker on issues of equity and currently the STEM director of Oxnard College. Lastly, welcoming to the crew, Anne McMullen. Say hello, Anne.
Oh, Dejana, it's just great to be with all of you today, especially today. But any day is terrific, but this one means a lot. So great to see everyone. Happy New Year to everybody.
Thank you, Anne. Anne is also an accomplished and respected education consultant based in Los Angeles. She is the project director for COSIN's Empowered Superintendents Program and the author of Life Lessons in Leadership. I cannot wait for our conversation today. What an amazing panel and a very, very special guest.
Yes, so Bethany, we have had the opportunity to have a couple of your teachers join us, and they have been so interesting and such committed educators. And so I'm curious about both your path to here, from the classroom to becoming a recruiter, and what you look for when you're out there doing your recruiting.
Yeah, it's so exciting to hear that Bob and Wilson were both on the show. I hadn't realized that. They are two amazing educators that have been through Encore. You couldn't better people. I can't say I recruited either of them, but I have recruited, I guess I would say hundreds at this point of our teaching fellows. So yeah, I'll tell you just a little bit about how I started in education and got here. I have a degree in math. And when I was nearing graduation, I worked for Teach for America. And I actually recruited students on my campus to become teachers through TFA. And then I wanted to do it myself. My mom was a kindergarten teacher for about 25 years or so. And honestly, never thought I would become a teacher. I was going to be an actuary and make money. And that just, I worked for an insurance company one summer and decided that was not the right fit for me. So I taught high school math and science at Da Vinci Schools here in Los Angeles. It was an amazing experience. And I actually got to see all grade levels of math and science from about kinder to 11th grade. And that was really quite interesting. What I saw in doing that, I was a math intervention teacher for some time. And when I observed other teachers' classrooms, what I saw is those teachers that were super passionate about and loved math, their students felt the same, and they were doing really well in math. So, after leaving teaching, I did some education nonprofit work in various different organizations, but I ultimately found that I wanted to recruit teachers. And I thought Encore's mission was really unique because we're recruiting people who might not have otherwise gone into teaching. So it's like a new talent pipeline into the teaching profession. I spent some time recruiting teachers for a charter network, and you're stuck with only looking at the current teachers who have teaching credentials already. And so I thought, Encore, this was pretty innovative to bring new people into the teaching profession. And so that's how I got here. And I'm so happy you've met a few of those people.
Yeah, they were beyond impressive. I think everybody who got a chance to talk to them, both very different, but both brought such passion. And I wonder, not dissimilar from your experience of thinking you might want to be an actuary and then finding your way into teaching, there are a lot of people who chose professions and didn't have a summer to try it out, but found themselves,
Mm-hmm.
a few months in and just not as engaged in what they were doing as they wanted to be. I can imagine that where do you find people? How do you start the conversation?
Yeah. We were actually, our recruitment team was just looking at our data this morning. So this is pretty relevant. Where do we find people? It's different than, when I was recruiting for TFA, it was like very clear we're on a college campus. Those were our prospects. And we've found that we have to be very broad, looking for professionals with STEM industry experience who might have an inkling they want to go into teaching. We're not here to convince anyone that they're going to become teachers, but to sort of expose them to it and inform them how their experience could actually be super relevant in a classroom. So we find people everywhere from LinkedIn to, a job board like Indeed or something, a lot of word of mouth. And we work a lot with like STEM professional associations. So think like Society of Women Engineers or something like that, and making connections with those organizations that have professionals. We find, like you said, a lot of the people who are thinking about it are they're either kind of like burnt out in their career, or maybe they're just thinking about wanting to give back and do something more rewarding. Which is also really curious that we've had like our best year so far for recruiting during COVID. And I have this sense that people are really looking for like that rewarding thing and giving back, but also making connection with students, really with young people. Yeah.
So I'm going to admit right now that I introduced you just as Bethany because I was afraid to mess up your last name. So maybe we should just ask you to say your last name for us.
Yeah, it's my married name, Orozco.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I don't want to capitalize all of the time here. I saw you, Dejana, take a breath like you're going to ask a question. You're muted. You're muted. No, you're still muted, Dejana.
Okay. It says when you hold down the space bar, you're supposed to be unmuted, but that doesn't work all the time.
Yeah.
Bethany, there's this one part of your bio that I thought it'd be really cool for you to just share a little bit more, because I feel a connection to this piece as well. It says that this particular company you were energized by its mission because you believe that opportunity begins with education. And I'd love for you to just elaborate on that a little bit more, because I believe the same thing and it's quite inspiring, but it's always nice to like dive in and share exactly what we mean by that. So go for it.
Okay. Yeah. When you read that, I was like, oh, that sounds cliche. Like, oh God, I think I wrote that. It comes down to, I think having, it sounds like several of you are teachers or have been teachers. Having had that experience in a classroom where, my students came from diverse backgrounds, and definitely a majority of them were lower income. I had several students living in neighborhoods that were sort of gang ridden. And I just really believe that when students get engaged in their education, they see what their education can bring for them, that, that's where it all begins. And that every student deserves to have the same opportunities. That's kind of the basics. But not just, every student goes to, let's say, like a 4-year university or something. I just think that every student should have the option and the information to choose what they want to do with their lives. Something we actually just recently changed our mission statement at Encore, and it was about like being able to choose, basically. That not all kids are going to go into STEM, not all kids are going to, go to these 4-year universities, but to have the choice. Tim, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to, just one thing, I'm thinking about how different people get drawn into education. In my case, I had no idea I wanted to be a teacher. And then it was the summer after my sophomore year at Cal Berkeley, I wound up working at the Lair of the Bear, which is a family summer camp run by the Cal Alumni Association, and wound up running their arts and crafts program my second summer there, and just fell in love with working with kids. Just, liked it a lot more than what I was doing. I thought I was going to become an astrophysicist. And I found working with little kids and teaching science was so much more rewarding, feeling like I was making a real connection. So what I'm wondering is, do you ever go to the alumni associations at different universities? Because a lot of them run camps where, undergraduates who don't have any plans to become teachers wind up working there. and maybe making a connection and saying, hey, if you think this is fun enough that you'd like to do it all year long, then here's some information.
Yeah, totally. We kind of like take an approach like this with trying to work with organizations that have volunteers already,
Mhm.
or that are, you know, where people are exposed to kids or students, like let's say the robotics competitions, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, Boys and Girls Clubs, things of that nature. I actually just happened upon an organization in Berkeley that they're based out of Berkeley that sends recent PhDs overseas for 6 months of teaching. I was like, oh my God, we need to partner with them, because if they love it, then they'll come back to the US and then teach here. So, you know, there's like some of those natural pipelines, I think, of like, once you get exposed to it, you might really love it.
Yeah.
So, oh, go ahead, Ann.
Bethany, I wonder if you could share with the group where Encore STEM actually then places the teachers who go through your training. It was my real privilege to, as you know, to be with you for a training session some time ago, and the people you recruit are phenomenal. They bring such real world experience to the classroom, which is of such high value to students, because a lot of times it's, you know, why do I have to learn this math? What does this matter? You know, but when you've got somebody who has had a career outside of education to talk about why all of this is so important. But I think it's also critical to understand where Encore places their teachers. So could you explain that a little bit for us?
Yeah, and I think probably what you're getting at is that we place all of our teachers are going to be in Title I, you know, low income schools. So that's the number one for us. We ask teaching fellows to make a commitment of at least 3 years in a low income school. We right now are working in 3 major cities in California. So we're in LA, San Diego, and San Francisco Bay Area. So we place in both district and charter schools in those areas. And then we just expanded this summer to Denver, our first
congratulations.
state outside of California. Thank you. And it's so weird that we expanded like in July, and we literally have not had any boots on the ground. We assumed that we would, but we have 11 teaching fellows in our cohort so far. Our goal was 15 total, and we have 4 months to go still to recruit people. So we're going to exceed our goal for sure. So yeah, it's very exciting that we started a new area. Denver will be just like we do our work here in California in these lower income schools. And there's a huge need, not just there, but in some other states as well that we're looking at expanding.
Terrific.
I like that you mentioned the Title I schools, and I think that just means like low income, underserved areas. And I'm wondering about the training in terms of social justice, inclusion, and equity, putting people into, communities of color that have historically had some issues with feeling seen, feeling included in their educational experience. So do you guys provide some training and some support in terms of social justice, equity, inclusion, and this new term that I learned last week called abolitionist teaching?
I love that.
We certainly do. Yes. So our teaching fellows, they actually start their experience with what we call guest teaching, where they spend a couple hours a week in a mentor teacher's classroom at one of our school partners. So like seeing real teaching in action, good teaching. And that's for at least a semester before they even commit to earning their teaching credential. So that's first. Then we do online training through Google Classroom, and we do traditionally 3 in-person events each year, which we have shifted to virtual. But at all of these stages, we do some, diversity, equity, inclusion training, and provide some reading as well, some suggested reading and whatnot. We bring in some great outside facilitators to do some of that work for us. We also do that with our team. And really, I think this summer was sort of eye-opening for us, for everyone, obviously, I think, in that we still have a lot of work to do. And we kind of recommitted to that kind of work, especially within our team. Because I think if it comes from us first, and then, it passes on to our teaching fellows as well. So yes, it is a big piece of what we do. We also are looking out in our interview process for what we kind of view as cultural competency, or like cultural sensitivity, and the ability to receive feedback. Because we believe that, even wherever you're coming from, and, a lot of, if we look at STEM industry, honestly, like, let's just be honest, there's not a lot of people of color, right, in STEM, represented in STEM industry. And we have our own diversity goals of the type of people that we would like to recruit. But ultimately, at the end of the day, like, we represent STEM industry. That's who we're recruiting from. And so we recognize that we have work to do there, to make sure that those people coming from STEM industry are exposed to what it means to be teaching in a Title I school, as you're saying.
Yeah, I'm sort of bringing the conversation back to the earliest part, since we are all educators, have all spent time in the classroom. And I'll start, Bethany, with you. Like, how will you talk to your teachers about what's going on today and how to address it with their students? And then I would love to hear from anyone who has ideas on this.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear.
That seems very overwhelming. Thankfully, there's someone else at Encore that has that main responsibility, and that would be our program director, Angel. She's amazing at what she does. But I think that in any situation like this, I think I would just start with listening, and how asking questions. How do you feel about it? How do you think your students will feel about it? What does this mean for them? And probably what I would say to our teachers, is, I think it was what Dr. Marcela was kind of saying previously about, like, today might not be very productive. And that's okay. If you're gonna see your students over the next few days, maybe even the next couple weeks, recognize that their social and emotional needs might be higher than their academic needs. And that's probably across the board for the last year. And so how can you support those things? Because academics can come and go, and making it a comfortable space to support them and their lives is probably the most important thing to do right now.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Bethany, I was just gonna kind of jump on top of that. One of the things I think of is there's a reflection strategy that we use. I think it was by Clayton, and it's called DEAL. So describe, examine, articulate, learning. And I think, I was making phone calls. These aren't students. These are my colleagues, adults that I supervise, and just what are you seeing? And then examining it for what exactly is happening. I don't think the dust is going to settle for a while. So, we're not in a place where this happened months ago, and because this happened, these are the things that. So I just think sort of holding space for us to, no matter our age, if we're the learners or the educators, to be a witness to this this history as it's unfolding and to describe it. There's a painting, and I remember seeing it in a museum, and it's this whole war that's happening with horses and, swords. And in the middle is somebody hunched over and writing, and it's a scribe that's taking in this whole scene. And I kind of feel like that's what all of us are doing. And there's power. Nobody is going to ask me in 10 years, how did that agenda for that training go? Did you get it done on January 6th? But in 10 years, I'll probably still be talking about who I was with, what had happened, and what I thought about how things unfolded on January 6th. So sometimes it's good to know which way to roll with that. And hopefully as educators, what we do is we're able to help people use critical thinking and prioritize where to put that good thinking. So that strategy was by Clayton, and it's called DEAL. So it's describe without judgment. Describe what you see. Examine. Now that you see it, then you can start talking about what's happening. And then the last is articulate learning. And what I think is really interesting in articulate learning is pose questions. You don't have to come up with a solution, but what does it make you think about more? So.
Makes me think about a book that Cynthia McDermott from Antioch shared with us called The Rabbit Listened. And one of the things when Bethany started this, she was talking about listening. One of that book, the emphasis was everybody came in with this solution and that solution and this solution. And really all that was necessary in that moment was to listen to the individual and what was going on. And Tim, you use music in a lot of what you do with your students. That's part of what first drew me to your organization and to you, and to watch your what you do with kids. It's so impactful. I wonder, would you use that in this situation?
Yeah, well, one thing I found I was teaching when the Rodney King riots were happening. And one thing that seemed to help the kids was I brought in some songs from American history to show them one of the cool things about history is it can give us a sense of perspective that, we've been through worse. As scary as today is, we've been through worse, and we've come through it stronger and with a better sense of what it means to be an American. And so although I absolutely want to, engage the kids and talk it through, and not to dismiss their experiences, because it is scary, because it's happening right now, and it's happening to people we know sometimes. But I find history, it can be a great consolation in terms of things that other countries have been through, and the sources of inspiration that our founding fathers make, because they didn't have much of a roadmap for establishing a constitutional democracy. So how did they work this stuff out? What kinds of safeguards did they put in place? And how is it that judges, for example, that were appointed by our president are still able to look him in the eye and say no? So so civics and history and music can tell those stories, and can be some comfort.
I just want to second what Tim said. As a former U.S. history teacher, which I had the privilege of doing that for 18 years, and during that time, took many 8th grade students to Washington, D.C. to visit the Capitol. So as I'm watching all of this today, I'm thinking about those memories then. And I do think one of the lessons of the last year, maybe longer, is the importance of civics education.
Right.
And we probably dropped that a little bit over the last several years. And I think it's critical that we go back and do that again, and that people how that will all work, and the U.S. history. And Tim, I love your point about we've been through worse, and we will get through this, but we've got to know some stuff, and that's important.
So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we are out of time. It is 4:59. So thank you all. Dejana, do you want to wrap us up?
I guess so. And so our conversation comes to a close, but not to worry, we'll be back again. And we hope that you join us. But for now, I want to thank our guest, Bethany Orozco. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our amazing panel, Tim, Dr. Marcela Klein-Williams, and McMullen, and again, my colleague and good friend, Dr. Leah Haynes. This was another episode of Teachers for Teachers, and we hope to see you next time.